short introduction while we are waiting. People are joining. It's 7,
Sure.
a little bit more. So I met Aseem on a completely different thing a couple weeks ago. And then we realized how similarly we actually think about the problems we have in healthcare today. And for those who don't know me, I'm a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology at the School of Pharmacy. So I teach future pharmacists, and majority of future medical representatives of the big pharma in Croatia are pharmacists. So I'm trying to explain to my students that what they're going to do is extremely important, because they will more or less be defining the truth, what medical doctors will be conveying to the patients. And some of them will do it ethically and in the best way they can do it, while some of them will put profit, give more priority to the profit than to the real medical science. And despite we never met, I was actually following your posts for years now, and I am really impressed how you managed to fight the big guys, because this is definitely not easy. So for people who don't know Aseem is one of the most influential cardiologists in UK. He is actively campaigning for the healthy lifestyle, healthy diet, against the wrong recommendations we had for years, and we still have, against over-medication and everything which is actually bad today in our healthcare. And today we will try to discuss a little bit about how marketing is being done in medicine, because in many countries, it is illegal to directly advertise drugs. So marketing doesn't go as a direct marketing. And in this pandemic, we have seen how powerful marketing is. So now we have relatively decent number of viewers. So maybe Aseem, just as kind of introduction, maybe you can tell us a few words about yourself and why are you investing so much effort in trying to correct things which are not good.
Thanks, Gordon, and pleasure to be able to join you in this discussion today. So I qualified from medical school, Edinburgh Medical School in Scotland in 2001. So I've been a qualified doctor for over 20 years. And for me, my ultimate purpose in my work is to help my patients, very straightforward, to improve patient outcomes. And in that process of being a qualified doctor for over 20 years, I noticed over time that the patients weren't getting better on a population level. More and more patients coming in with more chronic disease, more medications. And tied to that, of course, is a big issue, certainly in the Western world, is around the problems of obesity and lifestyle-related diseases driving it. So that was my original motivation to trying to get to the truth, to understand with all of modern, so-called modern medicine, science, information, why is that not translating into improved people's health in the population? So what's actually driving it? And are we being taken away from the truth? And I slowly and reluctantly concluded a few years ago that honest doctors can no longer practice honest medicine, because we have a healthcare system failure rooted in an epidemic of misinformed doctors and misinformed patients. And there are a number of factors that drive that, Gordon, which are, as you've alluded to already, so the biased funding of research that's funded because it's likely to be profitable, not beneficial for patients, and the manipulations of data that go along with that. Biased reporting in medical journals, biased reporting in the media, it's a big issue. A lot of people's health decisions are actually influenced by media. Even doctors' health decisions often are influenced by media, mainstream media. Biased patient pamphlets, defensive medicine, commercial interests, of course, conflicts of interest, and statistical illiteracy, so an inability of doctors to comprehend and then communicate health statistics. So these are what we call the 7 sins that contribute to inefficient healthcare and incomplete knowledge, which is what we need fully. We need full information to make healthy decisions for ourselves, because nobody wants to make a decision for themselves that's going to be detrimental. So on a broad scale, the battle we're facing, Gordon, right now is one of truth versus money. And what we need is more truth and less of this commercial influence over information that is influencing clinical decision-making at the for doctors and patients in the consultation room, but even on a population level, when it comes to what people are eating and how they live their lives, a lot of it is being driven by big, powerful commercial interests. And one of the issues I think people probably don't fully understand or comprehend or appreciate is that much, if not most, of clinical medical research, certainly in the last 2 decades, is either low quality or basically false and doesn't benefit patients. And people don't know that. Doctors don't know that. They don't know the system failures that contributes to that information, misleading information. So what I've been doing, what my predominant role, one of my roles other than being a practicing cardiologist, is to help correct that through policy changes, through mass media, through dissemination of information, to improve patient outcomes. You know, very nice analytical framework that we use in medicine to teach and practice medicine is called the evidence-based medicine triad. And it's very elegant. And the purpose of that triad is to improve patient outcomes. So what does that mean? Relieve suffering, manage risks, and treat illness. And there are 3 crucial components that feed into that goal. Individual clinical expertise, your knowledge, best available evidence, and last but not least, taking into consideration individual patient preferences and values. And any deviation from those is going to either not give optimal outcomes or could harm patients. And the problem is best available evidence has been completely and totally corrupted in the last 2 decades by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yep.
To the extent where I would say, if most drugs that are produced are copies of old ones and the waste that goes along with that, and they're producing many drugs that ultimately prove to be harmful, you know, I give this in my lectures. I say that the overall net effect, in my opinion, of the drug industry on society in the last 2 decades has been a negative one.
Okay, so here we have a real problem which is not easy to solve, because there's so much papers being published today that nobody can follow the primary literature. You know, for COVID, there were a couple 100,000 studies published, so nobody can read them. So we need somebody to kind of digest this primary literature data and convert it into recommendations.
In other words, cut through the bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need someone to cut through the bullshit.
Yes. But, you know, the moment you have a smaller number of people making a kind of summary or declaring what is truth and what is not, this group of people are sensitive to influence from the big guys. And this doesn't have to be, you know, just corruption, paying somebody to make a false statement. It can be soft influence, like giving you a large grant, and then you will not go against people who give you a lot of money. And this is the real problem. And as I say, so many decisions today are based on these not so transparent mechanisms of making decisions. And I think one of the examples which you often say in your public appearances, and which I also say to my students, are the statins. Can you give us a short introduction in the statin story?
Yeah, so statins are one of the most prescribed, most lucrative drugs in the history of medicine, estimated to be prescribed certainly to maybe 1 billion people around the world. They were marketed, certainly they came out in the late 80s, early 90s as a magic pill, if you like, that was going to end heart disease potentially by the beginning of the 21st century, which it hasn't done. And based upon the fact that there was a now quite flawed hypothesis that high cholesterol was the most important risk factor for development of heart disease. And if you lowered cholesterol enough, people wouldn't develop heart disease. That was essentially the thinking. And clearly statins haven't done that on a population level. They haven't reduced cardiovascular mortality, even though they've been prescribed for 3 decades. And one of the reasons for that, Gordan, is let's not presume any fraud right now. Let's just look at the actual data. What did the published data reveal? And when you break that down, there are two ways of looking at the statistics. One of them is what we call numbers needed to treat. So if I'm having a conversation with a patient and they are not at high risk of heart disease, which is most people prescribe them as a preventative measure, okay? What they're not told, Gordan, is the actual randomized control trial, the highest quality data on them, albeit sponsored by the drug industry who have not shared their data, okay, doesn't reveal any mortality benefit. You're not going to live one day longer. But it may give you about a 1% chance in preventing a heart attack or stroke in the next 5 years. Now, that's quite 1%, right? 1 in 100. If you're, and patients are not told that. But actually, we have directives, even from the World Health Organization 2009, that is an ethical imperative that every doctor and patient have that conversation in those terms to help patient make informed decisions. So that's one of the things to say. Another way of looking at the statistics on statins is if you do an average potential median increase in life expectancy in people who are high risk. So with high risk patients, which is where there is more benefit, and that means people who have had a heart attack or people diagnosed with severe blockages of their arteries, heart disease, then the median increase in life expectancy, and when I give this, by the way, when I give this figure to doctors and lecturers, there are gasps from the audience to doctors when I tell them this. You know, I've been prescribing statins for most of their career. The median increase in life expectancy over a 5-year period in the highest risk groups from taking statins is just over 4 days over a 5-year period, right? So this is a drug that, you know, it doesn't come with serious side effects, but it comes with often debilitating side effects, which are usually fatigue, muscle aches, etc. They can give the illusion of protection. People are taking this cholesterol-lowering pill, and people think, oh, my cholesterol's low, I can eat what I like, I'm not going to have heart disease. So if you think about all of the negative side of it, the net effect in a patient who believes they can eat what they like, prescribed a drug which has a very marginal benefit at best, could well be a negative one. So my third book, A Statin-Free Life, tries to counteract that narrative by breaking down the data in the best possible way. And then linked to the whole cholesterol hypothesis, because most people listening, I'm sure, have heard or think that high cholesterol is really bad for you and is linked to heart disease. I was involved in a systematic review published in BMJ, Evidence-Based Medicine Journal, a couple of years ago. And what we did is we took all the drug trials to see whether was there a clear reduction in heart attacks and strokes with reducing cholesterol from drug trials, and there was no clear correlation. It's been gospel truth for many years in cardiology circles and medical circles that there is a linear relationship, the lower the cholesterol, the better. The drug trials themselves showed no clear relationship with preventing heart attacks and strokes. So statins benefits are probably, that small benefit is nothing to do with lowering cholesterol. It may well be an anti-inflammatory benefit or a clotting benefit. So that's really, what I've been trying to do is to change the narrative and with up-to-date evidence on statin drugs. But people need to understand, many people think medicine is an exact science. And it's not an exact science like, say, physics or chemistry. It's an applied science. It's an art. And it uses information based upon probabilities, and those things can change. And today's truth in medicine can be tomorrow's folly. You know, the founding father of the evidence-based medicine movement, David Sackett, said 50% of what you learn in medical school will turn out to be either outdated or dead wrong within 5 years of your graduation. The trouble is nobody can tell you which half, so you have to learn on your own. So that's what I've been doing. But you see, the public still think, or they think that, you know, it's very mechanistic. Medicine is pure, and if you have a risk factor like high blood pressure and you lower it, you're not going to have a stroke. This stuff is unfortunately a false perception fueled by, you know, part of it's cultural, part of it's media, part of it's conflating more pure scientific fields like astrophysics, for example, which still evolves, right, with medicine, and nothing could be further from the truth. You know, we treat human beings. You know, medicine is about treating human beings, not about treating blood pressure or diabetes.
Yes, and each of us is different, and
Absolutely.
medicine generally does not appreciate that because everything is based on a standard human, which does not exist. And I think it is extremely important for people to understand how little we actually know. And I think diet is one of the best examples.
Yeah.
Because until a couple of years ago, the recommendations were eat a lot of carbohydrates, don't eat fat. And then people were taking a low-fat yogurt, which actually had twice the calories of the regular yogurt because it was full of carbohydrates. And, you know, these things persist for decades after we even know the truth. So
Yes.
now we know that it's definitely not healthy to eat too much carbohydrates. But then again, people are different. Some people cope with carbohydrates better than other people. And in the same time, we are kind of educated that we have to trust our doctors. And everything a doctor says is the truth. So how can we solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gordon. So, you know, I think about what we are really trying to deal with, what we're trying to sort is we're trying to create a revolution. Things are so bad. You know, I say honest doctors can no longer practice honest medicine. Things are so bad that that's what the state we're in. I said that in the European Parliament in 2018, the lecture I gave there. So we've got to move a mountain. There's actually a nice approach structure developed in Thailand called the triangle that moves the mountain. And what it means is you join three influences, if you like, influencers or influential entities to move that mountain together. Political, the knowledge, and the social movement. Primarily, the knowledge has to be concrete and correct and up to date. And then that knowledge has to be disseminated to the masses for the social movement as well, or people, maybe it starts with a small group of people who are more aware than others, like ourselves, for example, right? And then it has to reach the politicians, because ultimately the politicians, the government, are responsible for laws, for regulating, for making sure, like, for example, you know, why should food industry be getting away with marketing unhealthy products? Why should any corporation or any business that has a negative impact on society continue to function in the way that it functions, right? So that's what we need. But to do that, to achieve that, certainly historically, the most important platform, and this is, I'm not saying this is easy, but I've been doing this over the years, whether it's sugar or statins or too much medicine, is mass media. And, you know, some of the people that inspired me in the different revolutions, people like Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King, you know, were people, the way that they created those changes is rely first and foremost, have faith and trust in the human. Most of us want to do the right thing. Most of us want the truth. Most of us hate injustice. It's intrinsic in our nature. You make the injustice visible.
Yeah, I think that
this is an injustice that's going on, but that is the key, right? So for me, I have tried to use it now. It doesn't mean all of the mechanisms are important. And your communities, speak to your friends, things grow. That social movement grows. And then when you combine that with what we call top-down change, and you have the social movement, and they meet in the middle, that's when you have a revolution. Yep. So that's the way, dissemination of the truth. There's nothing more powerful than that. But it needs all of it. But it needs, as you said earlier, people turn a blind eye when they should be speaking out. And if we are not part of the solution, we are part of the problem, and there will be no solution. You know, there's a nice summary for everyone to think in their own lives, okay? So arm yourself with the knowledge, but knowledge without action is vanity. Action without knowledge is insanity, okay? But wisdom without courage is fruitless. Yep. You know, people like, you know, great philosophers like Socrates taught us that to lead the good and happy life, we have to live according to virtues, you know, like truth and justice and courage. You know, courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any of the other virtues consistently.
Yep, I agree.
So that's what we need, Gordon. We need, people need, and listen, and speaking the truth is not easy, and people take hits, and I've taken lots of hits in my career. But, you know, you talk about these people that are acting in certain ways for their own personal profit, but it's actually irrational, because we all are interconnected, and our personal gain ultimately will only last so long if it's having a negative impact on everybody else. Yep. So we have to think more rationally. It's actually more rational to speak the truth and to think about, when I act, I think rationally that if I'm doing something to help my community, which, by the way, even on a personal level, we look about what brings meaning to people's lives, what gives them happiness, actually, it's actually helping others. or at least doing something to help your community or people around you, at least do. And so it's a win-win for the individual. You help society, you're actually helping yourself, Gordan. And a lot of people don't realize that. They're very short-sighted. We have to convince those so-called people, some of them call them corrupt, some of them call them blind, some of them call them willfully blind, whatever it is. I think ultimately it is an ignorance of this concept that their behavior, which deviates from the truth to profit from lies, is ultimately going to be detrimental to them. If not them, then their kids or their kids' kids.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to, that's the message we need to get to the so-called people in influential and powerful positions. And I think if we can convince them, because I think most people want to do the right thing, most people want the truth, we can change that.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. And actually, this is why we are talking, because in what we have seen in the past 2 years is that actually media, together with the politics and with some big both tech and pharma players, work together to create an alternative reality.
Yes.
To create, to convince everybody that science is saying what science is not saying.
Yeah.
This was not easy. It was not easy to go against this mass media. It is still not easy. Now it's easier than it was maybe 2 years ago. But I agree completely with you. The majority of people actually want to do good. And we have to help them understand that what you are reading in a newspaper and seeing on a television may not be the truth. And then the key problem again is who determines what is truth? How can we, because, you know, we have fact checkers, which are actually censors, which
yes, agreed,
not with the facts. And so many people have been silenced. And, you know, some prevailed, you prevailed, I prevailed locally. And, but so many decided, you know, I'm not going to take all those hits, and somebody else has to do the work. And I agree with you, we have to do it.
Yes.
Because if we don't do it, you know, scientists who have the knowledge, who have the personal integrity that they will not be easily bought with research grants or whatever, we have to go public and tell what we think. And I think it is really important to convey this message. And it's the problem I see here, again, which I don't know the solution is, you know, if somebody has a couple hundred billions of profit, and we have a situation now that there is a part of the industry which generated billions, hundreds of billions of profit, which they're using to lobby through the formal structures of government, advisory committees. And I don't know how to fight it, because what we have seen all around the world is that advisory committees make some kind of recommendations, and then few people leave these committees, and then they make another type of recommendation. And it doesn't matter which kind of recommendation it was, but obviously there was a pressure from somewhere.
Yeah.
Some people left, say, I'm not going to do it. The other people complied. And then when you have a formal bodies making decision, if you go back in 2008, we had a WHO describing quotas, how much of Tamiflu each of the countries can buy, if you remember the swine flu pandemics. So they were actually, you know, if you put a limit and say, you know, Germany cannot buy more than 1 million boxes, of course they will buy more, because they're a powerful country. And I really don't know how to fight these problems. What do you think?
First of all, we can't give up, Gordan.
No,
you know, we have to keep going and disseminate the information. I think one of the things that is interesting is that when the health of the population deteriorates, which it's doing generally, certainly in the UK, and I'm sure in places in Europe as well, when people aren't living lives that are conducive to good health and happiness, they lose trust in their government, and the government ultimately will collapse. So those structures that are profiting right now, this will not last. It will not last. It can't last. You know, that grounds, people are going to realize something isn't right. They're not doing the, you know, there are two purposes of government primarily: to protect their population from external aggressors and to protect their population from disease. And I think that we just have to keep hammering away and keep the faith and keep going and sharing this information, because I think the army of people that are realizing something isn't right and are not happy with the way that the world is working right now, and are not happy that they are uncertain about who to trust, that is growing. We actually have to hold our government to high account. It's not good to have a society where people don't know what to believe and what not. I want the medical profession to be trusted to do the right thing. I want my government officials to be, you know, to uphold, we have something in the UK called the 7 Nolan principles of public life. Anyone who has a role in public life, politicians, doctors, teachers, police officers, should adhere to these 7 principles, which are selflessness, objectivity, integrity, accountability, honesty, openness, and leadership. We have to go back to the very basics of how, and also we have to be also behaving in that way too in our lives, and ask ourselves those questions. Are we behaving that way?
Yeah.
Because if we don't behave that way, then society is, we're actually, you know, to paraphrase Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist, the further we get away from the truth, the further society we're basically going to, I mean, this is a society that's going down the road to hell. And we have to redeem the world from hell. And that's where we are right now. And the way we redeem the world from hell is through the truth.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I feel very sorry that Britain left the EU is that, of course, Britain also, or United Kingdom, has its deviations from the reason during the last 2 years of pandemics, but now it's behaving like quite a reasonable country, while some European countries and also the US and also half of the Asia are behaving just crazy. You know, we are going into another pandemic winter in many countries. There will be restrictions again, there will be mandates, and it's just insane. And I think it's extremely important to have countries which will not do it, like we had Sweden in the first part of the pandemic, which now everybody compares Sweden to other countries to say what was the best approach. Yeah. Croatia was also one of the more reasonable countries without too many restrictions and mandates. We did have some failures, but it was not that bad as other countries. And I'm shocked to see that with this kind of a wave of pandemics we have at the moment, with many people testing positive, but not so many people really sick, there is such a strong media campaign of spreading fear.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's either media just want to have clicks, you know, because fear is selling, or there might also be strong lobbying forces behind it, because this is generating huge amount of profit. And I think we have to be very persistent in explaining to people which decisions are made based on profit, and which are based on size. And what many of our colleagues have done wrongly is that they did not declare their connections with some of the players in the game. We had people who were owners of testing labs who were promoting testing on a TV, which should not be allowed. You cannot go and advertise your product and claim that this is for the public benefit. And it's kind of...
we're seeing that this is almost the pinnacle of the unchecked power of these big corporations. So I think one of the things that people need to understand, the concept behind what's at the root of all this, and I'll just elaborate a little bit. So a forensic psychologist called Dr. Robert Hare, in the late 70s, if I remember correctly, and early 80s, he was behind the original classification, the international psychiatric classification for what is a psychopath. And in the book and documentary, The Corporation, which was made and written by law professor Joel Bakan, he's interviewed. And he actually says that big corporations, pharmaceutical companies, for example, because they are literally, they are legal entities that actually behave and have historical evidence for behaving like a psychopathic entity. Not saying the individuals within them are that, but the system. So what we've got is, we've got an unchecked, very powerful, influencing organizations or entities that are functioning like psychopathic entities. And that culture from there is also seeping down. And that is anti-human. And if it's anti-human, it's not going to be good for us. So that, I think, is an interesting concept for people to understand. I think people need to be more aware of what's actually at the root of all of this. But you're right, there's a lot of these commercial interests. I think one of the things, specifically, Gordan, talking about discussions around, you know, one simple bit of information I think will be helpful to calm people's fears is making them understand the numbers in more simple terms. So without understanding the numbers involved, we talk about risk from COVID, for example, people are vulnerable to exploitation, political and commercial exploitation of their anxieties and hopes. That also occurs for medications and interventions to treat certain illnesses, right? Or prevent them. But when we talk about COVID, I think what's reassuring from my perspective, Gordan, which for me contradicts there should be, as far as I'm concerned, there should be no discussion at all anymore about further restrictions or lockdowns, because the current strain of viruses circulating of COVID is equivalent to the flu. We should keep repeating that again and again and again. And it's not that lockdowns don't come with tremendous harms, lockdowns do and restrictions do. And we're talking about moving towards society with more social cohesion and sense of community, and yet we are isolating people unnecessarily. Now, there may have been a case, and it's debatable early on, that lockdowns, and it's a very debatable, may have had some role. I don't know. My personal view is we should have been much better at protecting the vulnerable and elderly, and we shouldn't have done things the way we did. And of course, we should learn from that. There's no point crying over spilt milk. But people that do not learn from history are bound to live through it again. And
Yep.
That's one of the things in medicine as well, that concept. We need to basically apply, what do we learn from the pandemic? But talking about, you know, fear-based control is very, very, very damaging to people's mental health. And therefore, mental health will damage their physical health. So let's reassure people. Let's be honest with people. Let's not create fear. There are people who are still, and I understand why. All these images of people dying, and we were all in that situation at one stage thinking, what are we dealing with here? We didn't know so much about it 2 years ago. Now we have an evolution of that information. We've gone through it all. We've got a lot of people with natural immunity. To some extent, the vaccines may have helped certainly people who are most vulnerable. And we're in a much better place than we were 2 years ago. But in the sense of the pandemic, in terms of COVID, we're a lot worse off in terms of what's going on with mental and physical health. And any further restrictions or anything similar to that is going to be very, very damaging. And people just need to say no.
You know,
people need to say no and say, I'm not going to stand for this. I want more information. I want you to be honest with me. I want you to convince me in an honest and transparent way that the interventions you're recommending at government level are the right ones.
the problem is, so if we go 1 year back, summer 2021, in Croatia, we believed that things are more or less over. We had a big wave, majority of people got infected. The country was open, so the last summer was already open fully in Croatia. And even the key people in the government felt, this is all over, let's start to worry about the real problems. But what happened then is that some powers, I call them dark powers, or some lobbyists, went through some of the structures in our government and practically tricked the government into introducing these COVID certificates in autumn 2021. And the only reason to do that was to force people to vaccinate. Even at that moment, we knew that this is not stopping the spread. And I'm afraid that, you know, this is happening again. So somebody is investing billions in lobbying. And if you look decisions made by some of the governments, some European countries, some states in US, they're already announcing restrictions for the autumn. So I think it's extremely important to speak out, each of us, both scientists and people who are not scientists, medical professionals or anybody, and saying, you know, this is against the common sense. We've seen countries doing it, we've seen countries failing, we don't see effect of that. But then again, whenever we try to do it, there is a media campaign in mainstream media claiming, you know, restrictions save the planet. Which, you know, this is why we are talking here today, because now we have a couple hundred people listening, and I hope more people will listen offline. And I think it's extremely important to know that science is not backing all these restrictions.
Yeah.
Science is not backing over medication, which we are always saying. You know, one of the key problems we have today is over medication.
Yes.
You cannot treat everything with a pill.
Yeah.
You cannot fix a bad lifestyle or a bad diet with a pill. Despite,
yeah.
I would also like it. You know, I would prefer to take a pill instead of avoiding some things which I like to eat. But
yeah.
it does not work that way.
I know. How great would that be? But absolutely, it's deception on a mass scale. You know, we've got a system that, you know, we talk about this free market. It's not a free market. You know, Adam Smith, who's behind the free market economic model, said that markets function best on perfect information and relative equality. We've got neither. We've now got a freedom to deceive market that fuels the business of selling lies. People are being lied to on mass scale. And the reason that it perpetuates itself is people don't know about the system failures. So there's a nice quote from Noam Chomsky, the American economist. The general population doesn't know what is happening, and they don't even know that they don't know.
Yeah, they all think they know. That's the problem.
And what's worse than ignorance? The illusion of knowledge.
Yeah, because then people kind of fight for what they think they know, and they don't know.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's a tough job, because, you know, we are kind of fighting the giants with a lot of resources, and it's not easy, but we have to do it because there's no other way out.
Absolutely. And safety in numbers as well, Gordan. I think if we're all working on an individual level, it's much easier to take us down individually. But if we're an army of people, it's very, very difficult. And I think ultimately, conceptually, the people have the power. They just don't realize how much power they have.
Yep.
It has to be utilized. You know, ultimately, the majority, the democracy, you know, I believe in real democracy, you know, in a fair society on people making informed decisions. And we have that power to create that society. We actually have it within us. But it does mean that we have to stand up, and we have to help each other and have each other's backs too in the process.
I agree. And I think what is extremely important is that also we work together with the media, because there are, despite media generally kind of playing into one direction, there are always individuals which are willing to go against this kind of dark powers.
Yeah.
I know we had, for example, in Croatia, we had a series of kind of documentaries about the public procurement in this pandemic. So how much money went sideways in buying, in this emergency buying of protective equipment, vaccines, drugs. It's unbelievable how we all became kind of just
indoctrinated.
We just kind of said, you know, it's emergency situation. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. We went along with it. I know the fear was exploited, right? And there was unknowns, and we thought that people were doing the right thing. And obviously information has changed and evolved, and now we can look back a little bit. The good news is the situation in terms of the pandemic and the deaths are down massively, and that's reassuring. and it allows us to hopefully think a little bit more clearly, and therefore then learn from it, and then make sure, the way the pandemic has been handled and the overprescription of drugs, in quotes, okay, has all been predictable and getting worse over the years, because the structural drivers of these problems have not been dealt with at the root. And as I said, it's about unchecked power, increasing unchecked power. If you talk about pharmaceutical industry, most institutions, certainly in Britain, in the 1990s, only get a small amount of their funding for research from drug companies. Now, most of it comes from drug companies, right? So we've got, and universities, as you know, Gordan, are supposed to be guardians of the truth and represent the moral conscience of society. But just think about that. If those institutions that are supposed to be guardians of the truth and represent the moral conscience of society are being controlled by the psychopath, what's going to happen?
Yep.
What's the downstream effect of that? We're seeing it play out now.
Yep. And it can be very soft. There are no.
Oh yes, invisible. Yeah, I don't think it's a very. You're right. It's an invisible power as well, right? It's a very soft. I agree, but the end result is still the same. Whether it's soft or whether it's blatant, the end result is still a damaging health, mental and physical health of society, and a society that is regressing. Is going backwards, not forwards.
Yeah, I know. And there is this famous example of big food companies supporting research on exercise, because we all kind of led into believing you can sweat out the bad diet.
Yeah,
completely. Yeah. And they were not preventing people from doing research on bad diet, but if somebody tried to do research on bad diet, they actually gave him money to study exercise.
I know. I wrote an article in the British Journal of Sports Medicine a few years ago, which people can look up because it's free open access. It became the most read of the year in that journal, and it was like over 1 million. It was one of the BMJ journals, 1 million views, and it was called "It's Time to Bust the Myth." I went very strong with my title on purpose. It's time to bust the myth of physical inactivity and obesity. You cannot outrun a bad diet. And we talked about the PR machinery of big food and companies like Coca-Cola. And it, in fact, inspired a New York Times front page article, because the journalist for the New York Times contacted me and said, because of that piece, he then exposed that Coca-Cola were funding a science institute to shift the blame for obesity away from poor diet to exercise.
Yep. Yeah, and it's and we just got a comment now that we are pulling no punches, but that's not the way to solve the problem. So we cannot just punch somebody in our discussion and expecting it to solve the problem. I think what we are now trying to do is to educate people.
Yeah.
To tell them that they should also try to do something similar. So discuss about the fact, try to understand what is going on. It's extremely important to try to understand what is real science and what is not.
Yes.
And I think here we definitely have to follow the money, see where is money coming from. If somebody is not declaring ties to the pharma companies, they should not be allowed to discuss these things. And not all pharma is bad. I always like to exemplify, for example, what AstraZeneca did, their vaccine. They said during the pandemics, we're going to sell it at the cost price.
Yeah.
And this is extremely ethical.
Yeah.
They say, we want to be part of the solution. And what happened? They were kind of crucified all around the media. And some countries said, you can't use it in people above 55, not for people below 55, not for this, not for that.
Yeah.
It's just marketing. And this is hard to fight. So we said we're not going to open vaccines. There will come time when we can talk more about the vaccines. But I think we have a few more. So maybe it's maybe we can slow.
Yeah, I'm doing my own data analysis on the vaccine. So I'm sure maybe in a few weeks, hopefully, Gordan, I'll be able to have a more a detailed and precise conversation with you. I'm very happy to do that on the vaccines, about the benefits and, are there harms? What are the reporting rates? What's the mechanism? What do we do about it? So I'll hopefully be able to have an informed discussion with you in a few weeks' time once I've completed my data analysis.
Yeah, many people are doing that, and from my end, for example, we know so far that glycosylation caused by the vaccine is wrong. We are actually tricking our immune system into thinking that this is a different type of antigen, but vaccines are not the topic for today.
No, sure.
We wanted to stress today is that science is something which is dynamic.
Yes.
There is no thing like trust in science, because our ideas are changing. What I studied when I was studying is no longer truth in so many aspects. Published papers are false very often.
Yeah, yeah.
Even good science can be misinterpreted.
Yeah, there's a nice way people, if there's some education today, all industry-sponsored drug trials should be seen as marketing until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's important to be, we cannot expect regular people to read all the papers and understand everything, but they have the right to ask the question, is this working? Show.
Yes. Yeah.
And we have to go back to, we knew it before. Just in this pandemics, all these things got worse because now, you don't need science anymore to start giving boosters. Somebody just decides, yeah, this is good. But yeah, I think we are getting smarter, and eventually, we will become a better society.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to do it if not for us, for our kids, for our future generations. We have to fight for that.
Definitely. So maybe closing words from your end.
I think people should have hope. People should not be afraid to speak the truth. It's not easy to speak the truth, but it's even less safe to not speak the truth. And we will get there. Keep the faith. I think we're heading towards hopefully a better place. Good health doesn't come out of a medicine bottle. Most of what's increased our life expectancy over the last 150 years has been through public health, whether it's safe drinking water, seatbelts in cars, smoke-free buildings, safer working environments. Modern medicine has added maybe 3.5 to 5 years out of a 40-year increase in life expectancy since 1850. And most of that increase in life expectancy with modern medicine has not happened in the last 2 decades. This is antibiotics for infections, the development of aspirin, insulin for type 1 diabetes, hemodialysis. So a lot of what the drugs are being produced in the last 2 decades are not doing very good for the population at all. We need, one of the most powerful messages I would give to people, depending on whatever situation they're in, is the power of lifestyle changes in terms of health, quality of life, and risk dwarfs modern medicine, and very rapidly. So it doesn't take a long time. When people change their lifestyle, when they think about their stress levels, when they think about what they're eating, their activity levels, their quality of life and their risk factors within weeks improve dramatically. So don't be afraid to try those changes, thinking it's going to take a long time. It won't take that long.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Lovely to speak to you, Gordan.
We can do it.
And keep up the good work. Let's keep doing this together, yeah?
Yeah, and we can chat about vaccines in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I look forward to that. All the best.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope I will be able to put the recording also on the web. I'm horrible in this. I apologize for all the technical problems. Bye.